Welcome to day 2, session 3. This is the last one for today. It has been a big day. Who's been to all 3 sessions today? If you have been, let me know in the chat because you get a big gold star. So don't forget, if you have missed the sessions 4 up until today, you can catch it on the replay in the Summit portal. But this session, I know a lot of you have been looking forward to, is the ins and outs of pattern making with the gorgeous Sarah from Waves and Wild. We have live all the way from Western Australia. So Sarah is a former primary school teacher and has a GCSE, which I don't know what that is. I'm assuming it's a higher education in fashion and design, which she concedes is probably the equivalent of a PhD in how children's clothes work in real life. Sarah started out designing and making cloth nappies before she set up her business, Made by Jack's Mum, in 2012. She started out selling ready-to-wear clothes, but quickly realised that what she enjoyed most was creating original PDF patterns. So after having a second son, she moved back to Australia from Yorkshire in the UK, and Made by Jack's Mum underwent a revamp and is now known as Waves and Wild. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here.
Oh, good. Thank you. So I thought we'd just start. Can you share with us a bit about how you got started with sewing and where did Waves and Wild begin?
Sure. So you touched on it a little bit, but I've always enjoyed sewing. I did it at school, and even before that, like my mum taught me how to sew, and I had a sewing machine growing up, and I always used to enjoy experimenting and designing my own clothes. But it was always just a hobby and something I did in my 20s to be rebellious and to be able to do something different to what was in the shops. But it all started really when Jack was born. Jack was, and still is, extremely tall and slim. And as you said, I started off with cloth nappies. And so if you've ever used cloth nappies, they are ginormous. So I had these ginormous cloth nappies on this little string bean of a child, and I just couldn't get clothes to fit. And we live in a decent sized town, but it's fairly remote in Australia. It's about 4.5 hours to the next big place to go shopping. So if we can't get something in the town that we're in Albany, then it's either a week for stuff to come by post. I have to say, I miss the UK and next day Amazon deliveries. So it was either a week to come by post or it was a 4.5 hour drive to go shopping. And that's just not doable for every time you need something. So I couldn't get clothes to fit Jack. So I started making them because that just seemed really obvious to me. I'd always made clothes for myself, so I can make them for him too. It's just a different shape. And then I used to dress him in these cute little outfits and these cute little cloth nappies. And people, it's a small town, and it's just how small towns work. People would see him and be like, oh, that's super cute. Can you make me one of those? And so I started making them for friends. And then people were like, oh, you should do markets. You should sell them. So I set up this teeny tiny little business that was really just something to keep me entertained while he napped infrequently. While I was on maternity leave, because we're very lucky in Australia. As a teacher, I got a good amount of maternity leave. I got to take a whole year off. So I set up this little tiny business selling cloth nappies and bibs and simple clothes. And that seemed fine. And I was like, okay, this is nice. But I was on maternity leave from teaching, and I missed, there's a certain joy you get from teaching, from being able to show someone a new skill and see them master it and see them go away, able to do something that they weren't able to do when they arrived. And I missed that. And so I thought, well, if I start selling the patterns, then I'm going to be able to help people along their sewing journey. I'm going to be able to help people make something that they've never done before. So that's when I sort of started. And to be honest, when I started, I didn't know what I was doing. I know what I was doing as far as actually making the patterns, but so far as running an actual pattern business, hadn't got a clue. First pattern I released didn't even have a website. People had to email me. I would send them like individual invoice, and then they would PayPal me, and then I would email them the pattern. It's grown a little in the last 11 years. I feel it's quite a slick business now, but it was not when I started.
I love that.
And it had some hiccups, and we moved back to the UK, and I tried to go back to teaching, and I had a job for a short amount of time, and then they reallocated my job and I didn't have a job. And sort of when I lost my job, that was kind of okay, let's give this a proper go. And that's when we went all in, and I really started turning it into a proper business, started actually learning how to run a business properly. And then Charlie was born, which gave me the excuse for all the baby patterns all over again, which was terribly fun. And then it's just continued to grow from there. I mean, it's just grown into this huge community that's a lot more than just me designing patterns from my little studio and selling them to people. It's grown into like a really fabulous community, which is what's kept me going. And then, yeah, as you said, we rebranded. So I started off with the name Made by Jack's Mum, because that's literally what I was. I was selling clothes that were made by Jack's mum. And that was fine, but it didn't, once the business grew and turned into something that was not just selling clothes from a little studio in our back of the house in Australia, it needed to move on. So a couple of things about the name Made by Jack's Mum. It alienated all my American customers because it's made by Jack's mum, and you don't say mum in Australia. It made me sound
Mom.
Yeah, it was only an English company, which is not the case. This is a company for everybody all over the world.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I started getting a lot of feedback was that people were like, oh, yeah, no, your patterns look nice, but I'm not a mum. And I'm like, oh, no, you don't have to be a mum to enjoy the patterns. I'm the mum. You can be anyone in the world. But the first impression a person gets of your business is your business name. And that's the impression they were getting. And they were going, like, turning away straight away. And it just didn't represent where we were and what we were trying to do. So, about 1 year pre-pandemic, we started planning the rebrand, and then the pandemic hit and we got sent home in the UK for 9 months. And that was really hard to try and organize all the rebrand while trying to deal with the pandemic and homeschooling and trying to organize moving back to Australia at the same time. I mean, it was a lot. But yes, we finally made it. And in March 2021, we became Waves and Wild and have never looked back.
And where does the name Waves and Wild come from?
So to be honest, I just wanted to go with something that represented a feeling. I didn't want it to be the Fabulous Pattern Company, because that was too constricting. Because right now I don't just do patterns, I do courses as well. And I'm trying to get more into YouTube tutorials and trying to be useful in lots of different ways. I wanted something that could expand as the business expanded, and just it reflects where we live. We live in this wild, beautiful part of Australia. We're right by the ocean. And in my logo, I have a whale tail, and Albany's famous for whales. And I also like the idea, just the word wild to me, because I've always talked about my clothing being like clothing for adventure. It's not clothing for the catwalk. It's not clothing for sitting and sewing a pretty seam. It's clothing to get out and do stuff in. I just had this image of my wild children out in the wild country that we live in, and that's where it came from.
I love that. That's got so much meaning behind it, without it being overtly obvious too. It's nice. I like it. What was the first pattern you ever designed?
A cloth nappy pattern for Jack. It was just the first thing that I started sewing a lot of when he was little. I don't know. I fell in love with cloth nappies. If you've never done cloth nappies, you won't understand, but they are so terribly, terribly cute on tiny little squishy babies. But being this tall, slim shape, I was struggling to get one that fitted him. So I designed my own, and then tested it a whole heap, and launched that as my first pattern. Like I say, not even on a website, just on a email me, it's almost like I can snail mail it coming through the post. I would have sent it to them. Yes, that was the first pattern that I released.
I love that. I love that you just started. You were like, yep, this is what we're doing. It's good for you. I think my favorite pattern is probably the over-it-alls. I've made so many over-it-alls. It's such a good pattern.
It's definitely one of the most popular, and it's one of my favorite on like teeny tiny little people.
Yeah.
I have favorites for each age group, but that's definitely one of like for being like versatile and just looking super cute. It's definitely.
Yeah, and it's so good to like layer, and yeah, I've lost count of how many over-it-alls I've done, and I can do them in like, I don't know, half an hour. It's so easy. Well, the simple ones, if I'm doing like the fold over pouch or anything, the Kanga pouch is okay, but the circle through one takes me a little bit longer. Can you share a bit about your creative process when it comes to designing sewing patterns? So like, how do you translate your ideas into tangible and functional patterns?
Sure. So generally, before I lift up a pen or open my computer or something, I will have a complete idea of what I want to create in my head. So all the time when I'm out, I'll be looking at what people are wearing, looking at what's in the shops, looking at stuff on TV, just like constantly processing and never really switching off from that. And I'm just every now and then I'll make a decision. I'll be like, okay, yeah, no, I'm going to go try and do that. And then once I've decided a design, I might sketch it. And then I will go and try and create the pattern for just one size. So depending on who the pattern's for, if it's a kid pattern, I will make it in Charlie size. If it's a teen pattern, I'll make it in Jack size. If it's an adult pattern, I'll make it for me and my husband because we're all handy for testing it out, and I will just do one. I'm a very kinesthetic learner. I have to do things with my hands to be able to understand it. So there's times where if I'm trying to create a new way of like folding something or attaching something, quite a lot of the time I can't even picture how to do that. So I can't even create the pattern piece. I have to go away and I sort of cut up little pieces of material or cut up pieces of paper and have a practice first, and then it clicks in my head and I can work out how to do it. Once I've figured that out, I then sew up one version in whatever size and try it on and make adjustments as needed. Now, sometimes it works first time, more often with the kids stuff than with the adult stuff. And if it works first time, I do a literal little happy dance in my studio because it's such a relief. No joke, there are some patterns that have taken like 6 different iterations before it even leaves the first draft. Like when I was doing the longboard t-shirt, my husband must have got 6 new t-shirts, which are all there now as work t-shirts for him because they're nearly perfect, but not quite.
Yeah.
So I just keep practicing. And that's just like, obviously when people are sewing at home, you're not sewing up different versions of a pattern for sale, but you are sewing something up, trying to make it fit a specific person. And sewing up test versions is really important. So whenever I am fabric shopping, if I see super cheap jersey or if I'm ever at op shops, charity shops, thrift shops, whatever you call them, and I see bed sheets that are not gross, they're always super cheap. I buy them in like bulk because then I have fabric available for making up these test versions. So for example, the dress I'm wearing at the moment, the Kinjaling dress, took 2 or 3 goes before I was happy with how the pockets worked and things like that. And I made it out of bed sheets. So that's one of my tips for you, is to stock up whenever you see cheap, usable, decent fabric so that you've got it ready there for making up test versions. And then I tweak things, and then I go and I grade them into all the different sizes. And at that point, I then send it to my lovely test team. I have the most amazing testers. I don't know whether there's any testers who happen to sign up for this. If there are, then you're amazing. Things go through at least 1 round of testing, oftentimes 2 rounds of testing, and some things have gone through 3 and 4. I'm really particular with my tests that things have to be to my standard before I'm happy for it to go out. It's not just it's good enough, it'll be fine. Like I have really specific standards. So my amazing testers, I may have mentioned them. I literally can't tell you how amazing they are, because I can sew something for myself and that's great, but that doesn't tell me that it's going to fit on everybody. I need to test it on all the sizes, on people who don't fit into the sizes, on people who are beginner sewers, on people who are more experienced sewers. And so, yeah, testing can take anything from a week to several months, depending on the pattern. And then only when it's gone through that do we do all the final tweaks, and then it's ready to go.
There you go. You've got a tester here. Amy said, love testing.
Yay. Thank you, Amy.
I try to test, but I don't always get time because I'm just so busy with Sew and Tell, but I am in your testing team. Now, you talked about you draft your patterns out. So Janet did ask, do you use any particular software for drafting the final pattern?
Yes, I don't have there are not patterns, there are programs out there that will do the grading and things for you. I don't use one of those, partly because I was taught to do it myself, and partly because they're hella expensive. But I use Adobe Illustrator for literally for the drawing. So when I first started out, I did a lot of stuff by hand, and only at the final stages would translate that into a digital thing. But as soon as I became fluent using Adobe Illustrator, I now literally do everything on there from the very first draft through all the edits and things like that. It's a really good piece of software. I use about 2% of what it's capable of doing, but that 2% does everything that I need it to do. So yes, if you are looking for anything like that, Adobe Illustrator. It is a paid one. I have heard good things about Inkscape. I have never used it, but I do know testers and people who I in my admin and things like that who do use it, and they rate it very highly, but I can't personally.
Yeah, I've heard Inkscape's quite good too. And the other one, I'm going to look it up while we're on. It's Affinity Designer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's better than Inkscape, I believe.
Yeah.
But not quite as good as Illustrator. So I'm going to pop it in the chat for anyone who wants to check it out. It's a paid one, but I do believe it's quite good. And I know a few people use it for adjusting PDF patterns for projectors. So if they're making like adjustments on the projector pattern, they can do it that way. That kind of leads into, for those looking to venture into pattern drafting, what key advice or resources would you recommend to help them get started on their journey?
So it depends what exactly it is you're wanting to do. If you are just wanting to adjust patterns to better suit whoever it is you're sewing for, whether that's for yourself or for your kids, like I've talked about the fact that I have one tall, slim kid, so I've always had to adjust every pattern to suit him. There are lots of resources on blending sizes and adapting patterns. I have some on my blog. I am also working to expand my selection of YouTube videos, and that's definitely one that's on my list, is to do a video specifically on blending sizes. I do also touch on it I have a beginner sewing course called Winning Beginnings, and I touch on it in that, I believe. But yeah, for small adjustments and changes, I would just YouTube it, or come join the Waves and Wild group. There's I've forgotten how many we're up to now. I think 27,000 people in there, and they are just a wealth of knowledge, because I'm not available in there to answer all the questions a lot of the time. And oftentimes when I see questions, 5 people have already answered it as well, if not better than I could have answered it. So if you need to know how to do a small adjustment, like my kid is in this range for height and this range for waist, what am I going to do? People can help you with that. If you need to know how to sew up, like me personally, when I'm sewing for myself, my bust size is a different size to my waist size, so I have to blend my sizes in that. We can help you in the group doing that. If you want to get sort of deeper into it, you want to look for a course or some kind of facility to help you learn how to draft your own blocks. And so what that is it's taking all your measurements and creating a basic pattern piece that you can then adapt into other patterns however you want, but it will be specific and unique to you. I would say that this is best probably done in person. I know, even I live in the middle of nowhere, and the next town along to us, which is only 50 minutes away, they recently had at TAFE, which is college for non-Australians, they had a course on beginner pattern drafting and things like that. So in this 2 or 3 day course, you would go and you'd learn how to draft pattern pieces for your specific body. And that's really useful if you want to if you struggle with getting patterns to fit, or if you've got designs in your head that you can't find and you want to know how to create them yourself. Like what I do is not unique and like amazingly complicated or something. It just takes practice. So that's a great option. There are also places you can buy, you can put in your measurements and they will send you a custom block. I think there's one called Pattern Lab. Again, I haven't used it, but I have looked at them. I'm pretty sure they're called Pattern Lab, and you send them your measurements and they send you back a torso piece or a dress piece to your exact measurements. So that's another option. If you can't get to an in-person class, is to maybe start from there and then look for tutorials on how to adapt that for if you want a bigger sleeve, or if you want to have it buttoned down the front instead of I don't know, whatever. Honestly, like if you can't get, I would say an in-person class is always going to be the most useful and the best use of your time. Because it will be very specific and you're going to be able to ask questions and things like that, but it's not accessible to everyone. And so after that, honestly, YouTube, it's amazing. You can like learn how to run the world on YouTube.
I would agree with in-person as well. So I've done a couple of block making courses, and had I tried to learn it from a book, I think I would have been like way too hard. Like it's really, it's difficult to get your head around until you get it, like, and it's practice, like you said. So yeah, and it was interesting for me to realize that a block is not a pattern. I was like, oh yeah, okay, so I'll do my block and that's my pattern piece. And my teacher was like, no, that's your block. Like once you've got your block, then you've got to trace it off. Then you can start designing.
And also, if like me, you're not good at 3D imagining in your head, which I'm not, like I say, I have to do everything physically before I can figure it out in my head. And so, yeah, if I'd have tried to learn that all from like a book would be even harder than like tutorials, and in person is the best option. Yeah, that would have just been too hard. I need the 3D experience.
I would say though, while you're having a drink, so I really like this book, the Winifred Aldridge Metric Pattern Cutting for Women's Wear. I'll grab a Amazon link for those that want to look at it. But she is like the grandmother of all.
It's like
block making. But if you're gonna read this book, please find a tutorial to take you through it, because otherwise you're just gonna sit there and go,
and then you'll cry, and then you'll give up, and then that's just not what we want.
Yeah, so
I would start small, like start trying to adjust a pattern and see if you enjoy it, and then if you do, then maybe move on to the next step.
I'm just gonna grab that Winifred Aldridge, and I mean there's other books that you can get that are very good as well. Grab that there. So there are other books as well. Like I think I've got this one. This is a very expensive book, the Fitting and Pattern Alteration book, but this book is really, really comprehensive as well.
I have that one, but a different edition. I think it has a different cover.
Yeah,
but
I think I paid like $150 Australian for this, but it's a very good book. So, I mean, it's worth, I think, investing in books as well, as much as it's good to have your YouTube. Sometimes just having a look.
And it's good to have a range of sources to call on, because sometimes you'll read something in a book and it doesn't make sense, and then somebody will explain it to you and it does, or vice versa. Somebody will say something and you're like, yeah, I'm not getting that. And then you come back and look at it written down and you're like, oh no, that's clicked now. So it's, range of sources is the best option.
And then Anne also asked, she said, I'm interested in how to get the crotch right when the back length is much larger than the front, 20 centimeters. If you have any advice on adjustments.
So like if it's a specific adjustment you're wanting to make for yourself, maybe look up a full butt adjustment. And then there's you can get tutorials. There's pretty much every adjustment that you need. So you get full bust adjustments, you get small bust adjustments, you get full tummy adjustments. I personally, if I am doing something very fitted, I need a sway back adjustment. So you're wanting a full butt adjustment, and that will talk you through how to add in some extra space to the back rise compared to the front rise.
And conversely, if you have no butt, it's called a flat butt adjustment.
Yeah.
Because we just love making all sewers feel so special with their, such inclusive language of, oh, no, you've got a flat butt. Let's just make a flat butt adjustment. And I find I often need a full tummy adjustment because I've got the pouch. Like I've got that pouch. So, that's called a full tummy adjustment, which is also lovely to do.
We should just call them like fabulous tummy adjustments, or like I had two gorgeous kids tummy adjustment.
We should. It should be the kids tummy or the middle-aged
tummy adjustment. Tummy adjustment, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Patterns I'll start again. Patterns often involve a blend of artistry and precision. How do you balance like the creative aspects with the technical details to ensure that your designs are both aesthetically pleasing and easy for sewers to follow? So like, how do you kind of get your creative part in, but still making sure they're very relatable, I guess?
Sure. So I guess my style is not too frilly and fancy. There is nothing wrong with frilly and fancy. And I sometimes see like these amazing, gorgeous dresses with like 75 different layers and things like that. And they are gorgeous, but it's not my style. I don't wear it and I don't design it. So I generally will stick to pretty clean lines and simple, but try and always put in like at least one feature into a pattern that is interesting to stop it being just a plain pair of joggers or a plain t-shirt. I do have some basics out there. So like I don't know, say the amber singlet. There is nothing fancy about that. It's a free pattern and it's just a dead simple basic. But with all the rest, even when it comes to like plain t-shirts, I try and put in different hemlines so that it's just a little bit different. I try and put in features that are a little bit more interesting, like knee darts in the twist and shout, or the big statement sleeve in the Genevieve, but stick to one thing that's really fun rather than having lots. And with them all, or with many of them, I try and make sure that there is an option to sew a really simple version, so that there's an option available if you are a beginner. So say take the Jupiter leggings, there's the option that I like to wear myself has color blocking down the side and then an extra feature strip, and then it has a fancy pocket that goes sort of in and out and in, and then it's hidden. And I love that because it's really interesting. But there is also the option to sew it without all of those, to just sew a plain pair of leggings. And so that's kind of like the entry into it. Yeah. So if you are a beginner, you sew the beginner version. And I always put this in big writing at the beginning, and then people don't follow it and then they get stuck. But then they understand why they get stuck. Yeah. And then I can like console them because they understand. So you sew the basic version first. And then once you've got your head around that and you're not having to think about the first set of techniques, once you've mastered them, then you go and you try the next, you add in the fun things. So yeah, try and add it. And pockets.
Everything has to have pockets. Everything. I don't want it if it doesn't have pockets.
I know.
That's so good though, because you're almost getting a couple of patterns within one pattern too. Like you've got your basic version that you can start out as a beginner, and then you can build up to those, more complex steps while still having the knowledge of the basic pattern.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really like that. Like we were talking about with the over-it-alls, like you can do the basic over-it-alls. Yeah. You can do, what, I feel like a challenge today, and do the circle through pocket, so.
I think it comes back from being a teacher. Like every lesson that you do, you have to have differentiated expectations or differentiated work. And so you have the work for the people who are going to need some extra support, and then you have the work that would be the next step, and then you have the extension work for the ones who are going to need the extension. And so I think I end up just putting that into my patterns because that's my nature. It's like I spent so long being a teacher.
And with your instructions, do you write them all yourself, or do you get help? Like, they're so well written. How do you go about, like, do you put yourself in the shoes of a beginner sewist?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's what I think has made Waves and Wilds grow and be popular. I think, if being brutally honest, I think like I come up with some nice designs. I think I come up with some things that are quite lovely and I enjoy wearing them and things like that. But the patterns are not super unique and super different and things like that. It's the instructions, I think, that people resonate with. I come back to my teaching, and I think that in the instructions I'm quite good at being able to explain things in a way that people are going to be able to understand, even if they've tried before and failed, or if they've never done this before, or if it's new language. And I just keep coming back to like, well, if somebody doesn't understand the language or the process or things like that, how can I break it down? How can I explain it in a different way? Because I remember that even before I was a teacher, I remember that from being a student, like struggling to understand things and really remembering those teachers who didn't go, well, that's how it is. They go, okay, you haven't understood that. That's on me. I need to explain it better, and I need to explain it in a different way. And that's what I want people to take from Waves and Wild. I don't want them to go away feeling frustrated, because it doesn't matter that they've already paid me for the pattern. If they go away feeling frustrated, then I've failed, and they're going to go away unhappy. They're never going to come back, and they're going to have a bad feeling about sewing in general. So I want people to go away feeling that they've succeeded, or if they haven't, that they can see where they would succeed in the future, and they know where they could come for help.
That's something that I find really frustrating about the Big Four patterns. And when I talk about the Big Four, for those that don't know, it's like the Simplicity, McCall's, Berta, and Vogue. And I think they've got another one in there too. Anyway, the ones that you get from the big box stores. Because, and I get it, like they're all printed, so they're on a budget of how much paper they can use, and like they try to cram so much into these like A2 double-sided black diagrams, but
they make so many assumptions about what you already know, and you're like,
and
this is
it's
different language.
So confusing for a beginner sewist. And then I get so sad because people try to make things and they end up getting, you know, frustrated and quitting and going, I don't like sewing, I can't sew. I'm like, no, you can. It's just that you've had such a bad experience. So, you know, that's where I love suggesting companies like yourself that have such well-written patterns, because I think you get to know which companies have good written instructions and well drafted, not like you go, oh yeah, you know, I'm normally a size 2 for a child, and then you look and it's like a size 5 in another, in that pattern's grading, and you're like, really, that's quite different. So, you know, you get to know the pattern companies that do well, and yours is obviously very good. So thank you for having beautiful instructions. And I do think that's where PDF patterns also shine, because you're not bound by, I can only have one A2 double-sided page. Like you can write 70 pages if you want to, because it's digital.
I do. And like there have been times where I wonder whether I'm going into too much detail, but then I always figure, like, if you get somebody who's experienced, they're just going to skim over the diagrams and go, yep, I know what I'm doing. They're not going to get super angry about the fact that I've put in 3 different ways to explain how to sew a neckband, whereas the beginners are going to appreciate it. Not even beginners, just people who haven't done that technique before. Like you could have been sewing, you could have been quilting all your life, or sewing with woven, and then you suddenly come to sew a t-shirt and you're like, say what now? So I think it's really important, because
I find it funny that often quilters, and I went to a quilt show last year, I was demonstrating how to make garments. It wasn't a specifics quilt show, it was like quilt and sew and craft. But I spoke to many quilters and they're like, oh, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm making some patterns. And I think I made a few Waves and Wild ones too. I probably did a couple of overalls. And they're like, oh, I couldn't sew clothes. I'm like, but you sew quilts? They're like, yeah, I love quilts. And I'm like, but it's the same thing. Like if you can sew a straight line, or you can use your machine, if you know how to change the bobbin and stuff, I promise you can sew clothes. So then
you have to be so accurate in quilting. Like if you could do that with that level of accuracy, you're going to be able to sew like some clothes and make it work.
Exactly. And then I speak to sewists, like garment sewists. Oh no, I could never do quilts. I'm like, but you could. Like it's the same thing. It's just, you know, one you're sewing quilts, one you're sewing clothes. I personally haven't got into quilting because I'm a fast and dirty sewer, and quilts take like months and months.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nah, I just like any more than 2 days on a garment, I'm like, nah, bored, next thing. Like,
But I just have this thing where I don't know anything that I enter into. I'm always like, yeah, I'm going to learn to do that and I'm going to do it. So I never ever like let myself think, oh no, I couldn't do. It's like when people talk about how difficult sewing stretch fabrics are. It's literally where I started like 30 something years ago. And like nobody told me that it was difficult. And I was just like, yeah, I'm going to be able to do this. Woo. And it wasn't very good, but it got better. And yeah, all that positive mindset.
Agree. I hear people talk about, oh no, sewing knits is hard. I'm like, man, 80% of my wardrobe is it's definitely knit fabric because it's very blurry with how accurate you need to be.
Yes. And it allows for like a really big lunge.
Oh yeah. I mean, I do love wovens too. Like sometimes I'm like, nah, I want to sink my teeth into a woven pattern and really be beautiful. And I actually did the kinjaling dress for my membership. So I have a membership sewing corner, and one of the months I did the kinjaling dress. And I decided I was going to do the French seams, I think. And I was like, oh.
But it feels so good afterwards.
I could not be bothered doing it. But I was like, no, Megan, you are teaching people. So I think it took me 7 hours to film that tutorial for probably like an hour and a half of usable
filming
content.
stuff takes so long, doesn't it? Like it's not a long time, but filming is long.
The most beautiful dress, and I do love it, and I did feel very proud after. And I was like, yes, it does take time. So
I have to say, I think my favorite things that I've sewn for myself are woven. The majority is knit, but my favorites are woven. Like this dress that I'm wearing now, just because if I'm buying woven fabric, I tend to wait and buy something really special.
Yeah.
And then so like this is like hand printed, like by the fabulous Indigenous artists and things like that. So I make really special pieces as opposed to like I just make like t-shirts when I run out of t-shirts and then I wear them until they die. So yeah, I save woven for my special things.
I run out of undies because I haven't done the washing, and then I just make more.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh dear, better make some more. And in an ever-evolving world of fashion, how do you stay inspired? Like, how do you stay ahead of trends when you're creating new patterns? Where do you get your inspiration from? Like, where I think you said you're looking at people all the time, but is there any other way you kind of stay inspired and look at trends?
So as far as trends go, I honestly don't feel like I am very trendy. I am not in a bad way, but just in a like I want people to make my clothes and wear my clothes and for people to look at them and go, oh yeah, they're really nice, and not to go, oh yeah, that's really like 2020. I don't want things that are going in and out of fashion. That being said, like I have been inspired by trends. So when I created the Heydays, I can't remember when that was. That would have been 2019, 2018, around about there. In the UK, dungarees or overalls had just become kind of trendy amongst a certain demographic. They'd moved away from being just pregnant and in the 80s and painters and into like trendy mums and things like that. So I did, I guess, follow the trend with that, but only because it was something that I enjoyed and it was still falls into my comfortable and suitable for getting out and doing adventures. And yeah. But apart from that, I try and make things that are going to last for a long time. I'm not going to say like classics because like in my head that's more sort of your little back dresses and things like that. Like that's what I do. But people are always going to need a well-fitting t-shirt. They're always going to need a well-fitting summer dress, things like that. So far as inspiration, I am a sucker for sewing TV shows. I watch them all. Like I've signed up for every TV streaming service that there is over here so that I can get them all. So I've watched Great British Sewing Bee. And that's definitely my favorite because I've known, I knew one of the contestants a few seasons back.
Oh, that's exciting.
Excuse me. And in the same series, one of my patterns was used by two of the I Dig Dungarees was used by two of the contestants. They can't tell you, like they're not allowed to tell you even, they're not allowed to mention it anywhere because it's the BBC and advertising things like that. But as it was on Children's Week and they were sewing dungarees and I was like, oh yeah, that's really fun. I love dungarees, overalls if you're Australian or American. And as they were sort of showing the the patterns out on the tables and they were holding them against the kids to measure them. And I was like, that looks familiar. And then there was a set of instructions out and I was like, that's Jack. I was excited by that one. But then there's loads of them. There's Project Runway and Next in Fashion and all of those kind of things. And not that they're particularly what I do, because a lot of those are much more high fashion. But it's feeding the creative juices and getting me excited about sewing. Every time I get into a sewing slump, I'll go back and I'll rewatch an old season of Project Runway or Great British Sewing Bee, depending on sort of what kind of mood I'm in. And it just feeds the creativity. And then, yeah, it's just a bit of everything, like spotting people when we're out. And like the number of times I've been like staring at someone in a restaurant or something like that. And I'm like, I'm not like staring at them because I'm like being stalkerish. I'm staring at them because I'm trying to work out like how your dress fits together and things like that.
Yeah.
It's so gorgeous.
It reminds me a little bit when you said, you kind of take inspiration, but the trends and high fashion and stuff, it reminds me of The Devil Wears Prada when Miranda's talking about, the cerulean blue and how it started on this and it comes down and, it ends up in the department store that she picked it up from,
Yes.
Because I'm doing a fashion and design degree at the moment as well, poorly, but I really struggled with like the high fashion stuff because I'm like, this is not practical, we'd be watching runways where like the shoulders are out here and it's basically wearable art. I'm like, mate, you can't get in a TV, you can't get in a car with that. Like, how are you supposed to drive when you're like this, But my teacher was like, look, it's about starting out big and giving the idea to then have interesting patterns and designs in your wearable clothes.
Fill it down and down and down until it becomes like, I would love I'm not gonna lie, I'd love the opportunity to design some kind of haute couture Met Gala ridiculousness. It's not what people are gonna buy and make for their kids on a daily basis.
I just like tees, tees and dresses. I'm too practical for that fashion course. I really have to stretch myself because I'm like, but I can't wear it. Like, I don't understand. So, yes, it was very hard to get my head out of that sort of ready to wear phase box. Do you often see your patterns out in the wild? Like you're out shopping or you see something, you're like, hey, that's the dungarees, or that's the Kinjali.
I have occasionally, not heaps, because being a worldwide business, customers are all over the world. And like I say, we live in this, officially it's a city, but it's not. It's this small town with 30,000 people or something like that. But yes, I have. So like at the Albany show, which is our local agricultural show, and they have a sewing category that people can sew things and enter the competition. There's not usually that many entries. It's only a small town. But the person who won, I think, quite a few different categories at last year's show is clearly a customer, because I went through and I was like, oh yeah, I think it was overalls, and that's something else, and that's something else, and that's something else. And I was like, oh, that's and yeah, I haven't bumped into that many people wearing things, but I know other people who've bumped into other people who are. So one customer has bumped into another customer and they've gone, hey, that looks like a harem romper. And they're like, yes, it is a harem romper. It's from Waves and Wilds. And then they I almost wanted to get like pins made up at one point where the people could wear them so they could like spot other customers.
That's so cool. You should do that. That would be very cool.
And then similar, but not quite, more so when the boys were little, but occasionally like we'd get stopped by people and they'd be like, hey, or at the time it would be, are you made by Jack's mom? And I'd be like, yes, this is Jack. And then that was ever so nice as well.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
He's probably like, Mum, I'm just too cool for that.
He's all right at the moment. He would just kind of probably just do us like a smile at the moment. He's not quite hit the point where I embarrass the heck out of him, but I don't think far off.
Which is so exciting for you.
But then we get into the world of teen patterns, and that's interesting.
Yes. Now, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but pattern grading can be a really challenging aspect for many sewists. What strategies do you employ to make sure your patterns are inclusive and accessible to a diverse range of body types?
So this is something that I put a lot of time into, and I do my absolute very best, but I am going to constantly be frustrated that I can't do more. So when I first started doing adult patterns, for example, the size range went up to 5XL, which is just a number, like that can relate to all different sizes for different people, but that was the end point. And then a couple of years ago, I extended that up to go to 7XL. I'm slowly going back and going to the older patterns to extend those ones as well, because it annoys me that I have some that go to 5 and some that go to 7. So I have tried to increase the size range, but whatever size range I provide, there will always be people who are outside of that size range.
Yeah.
There is a limit to what I can do at any one time in one pattern. I do also struggle, and if there's anybody listening out there who knows anyone kind of in the 4XL to 7XL size range, please drop me an email, because we do struggle for testers in those sizes, and it can make testing quite challenging because I need to know that all the sizes work, and we don't always have testers in those sizes. So it's a little bit of a call out. If you know anyone in those size ranges who would be happy to test, please get in touch, because I would love to hear from you. And then I also try and provide, like I've said before, resources and support for people who need different sizes. Which is very normal if you are more than one size. So I'm like 2 sizes different for different measurements on my body, and that's really normal for lots of people. Do try and help people. It's quite often in the patterns there's some information. There's some information on the blog, and like I said, the group is really helpful as well, because it can get very complicated and difficult in some situations, but a lot of the time it's not actually. And if you are a 2XL here and a 4XL here, well, then we can just help you work out where the best place is to gradually smooth out the lines between the two and have a 2XL here and a 4XL here, and that's going to provide you with a better fit. So yeah, we try and help people where we can, but whatever I do, you literally could not design a pattern that would be able to fit everybody, because the world is full of people of wonderful different shapes and sizes. So there's never going to be a pattern that works for everybody, and it's just about trying to make sure people have the resources to be able to adapt the patterns to what's going to work for them.
I wish more people understood or realized that, like, such a limited amount of people fit in one straight size. Like, I'm across multiple different sizes, and part of the reason I love to sew is because I can make it to fit me. You know, like I'm often like an XL on top, but I've got a tummy. So half the time I'm a 2XL at the hips. So if I was buying store-bought clothing, I would have to buy something that fit my tummy so that I didn't feel self-conscious, but then it's really baggy up top.
No, same. Like everyone in our family, like I've said, Jack is very tall and slim. He always needs a smaller waist and chest than he does for his height. I have got disproportionately long legs. So like, even as a kid, I remember like my mum struggling to buy jeans for me that actually got all the way to the floor, because for my height, my legs were too long. And I now have a 40-year-old, 2 children figure. So I have more of a belly than I did when I was younger. So I need to be able to adjust for that. My husband has a long torso for his height. So that's one of the reasons why you get the longboard t-shirts. You will discover that a lot of my patterns were created to fulfill needs in our family. So that's one of the ones. He likes a long t-shirt. He gets really frustrated by short t-shirts that then shrink in the wash. That's his style. I think Charlie has just recently slotted into a straight 8. And that's, I think, the first time that any of us has ever fit exactly into one sizing. And I was like, oh, well, that's very simple.
I also wish that people understood that the sizing numbers are made up, as in there's no international standard for sizing ranges. So like I could be a 2XL in your patterns, but I could go to another company and be a medium.
And you are still the exact same gorgeous size. It doesn't change. Oh my goodness, I could talk about this till I'm blue in the face. I literally put a link to a blog post that I did when, like, it was one of the first things I had. It's almost a rant on my blog.
I've started a ranty blog before as well.
It's on my blog. If you just look up, it's called Ready to Wear Despair, and it's one of the really earliest blogs.
What's it called? Ready to Wear Despair.
It's got terrible photos because it was done so early on, but they're such useful photos. So in that, I show a picture of Jack, who's wearing a pair of boardies that I think were a size 2 and a hoodie that was a size 6, and they were bought from different stores. And the boardies, the size 2, were so big that they fell off him, and the hoodie, which was a size 6, was showing off his belly because it was so small. And that's like, it's the same in pattern companies as it is in shops. You can't go into one shop and know that I am always a size whatever. I'm always a size 14, so I'm definitely a size 14 in this shop. No, you're not. When I go to pick up stuff off the rack, I will pick up a 12, a 14, and a 16 to find out which one fits me best in that shop. It's the same with pattern companies. All different pattern companies will use, we will use similar measurements, I'm sure, because we've all been taught in similar ways, but there's no standardized measurements. And so you have to take your measurements. I can't guarantee that if you are a large with this pattern company and this pattern company that you're going to be a large for me. All I can guarantee is that if you take your measurements accurately, and I have stuff on my blog, I just did a reel today about measuring. I'm like, it is the hill that I will die on, is that you like measuring is the most important part of sewing. It's more important than the sewing. That if you take your measurements accurately, and then you choose a size based on those measurements, then you have an extremely good chance that it's going to fit, because I work so hard with my testers to make sure that the pattern matches the measurement chart. The pattern will not match your idea of what an XL or a 7XL is going to be, but it will match the measurement chart, because that's all I can do. I can't go and change all the other pattern companies and all the clothing shops out there. I can only do stuff within my own little channel. So yeah, that's I'm quite passionate about measuring.
Well, I was teaching in person for 2 years. I just finished at the end of last year. And I would have to say to my students, like, we would take their measurements and I'd have to say, now you need to prepare yourself, because you're probably going to be larger in in a PDF pattern or a pattern than you are in the stores. And I need you to understand that it is just a number, because they would get so down on themselves if they were an extra large, but in the shops they were a large or a medium. And I'm like, literally, it is a number, and so many of the stores do vanity sizing. So
and then the big 4, you'll be an even larger pattern size.
I'm like a 28 in the big 4.
Yeah. And like, people have suggested, like, why don't you take away the sizing altogether? Why don't you call them blue, red, and yellow? And I've considered that, and there are some pattern companies that do that, and I understand why they do. But excuse me, I already get a lot of people. So my baby and toddler sizing goes newborn 0 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 12, 1, 2, 3. And people in the UK, you wouldn't have a size 1. It would be in the shops as 1 to 2. And so people are saying, well, is a 1, is that a 12 months or is that a 1 to 2? Like, what does it mean? And I'm like, it doesn't mean anything. It means blue.
Take the measurements.
It means go measure your child. But people in the group, trying to be helpful and wonderful, but people get really specific about, oh, it means this. And so if I labeled my patterns as blue, red, and yellow for the sizing, then I would get a sort of a rush of people into the group. Well, what sizing is blue? I'm a size 12. What size do I need? And people would give them answers that were fixed answers. So I'm like, it wouldn't help it at all, because people would go, oh yeah, you need a yellow. And I'd be like, no, you don't need a yellow. You need a tape measure.
Yeah.
So that's why I've stuck with the lettering, the large, extra large, whatever, because then you've just got, it's an easy one to remember.
Yeah. And I know that because I asked my fashion teachers, I was like, well, why don't they do a standardized international standard numbering? And they said, because it's too hard. Like, different cultures, different areas of the world are built differently. Yes. Europeans, generally more voluptuous.
Yes.
Africans, quite slim but strong, because, you know, their ancestries ran from lions. Asian cultures, quite petite.
Quite petite, yes.
Yeah, like Eastern cultures, quite petite. Western cultures, well, we just keep getting bigger. But, you know, like, it's just, It's too hard to do a standardized numbering, because I think like if I went to Japan and I was like a 10XL, you know, they didn't even make clothes for me because
I know. I remember when I was in Vietnam and I was looking at shoes, and they just don't do shoes my size because nobody has feet because I've got large clown feet. And yeah,
my husband has a size 12 foot, and he looked at shoes in Japan and just no deal. They were just like, size 12. Are you a giant? Like, are you Bigfoot? Kelly Ann asked, what are your future plans for your patterns? Anything in the pipeline?
Oh, so many things in the pipeline. It was a running joke with my last assistant, Amy, who was with me from Made by Jack's Mum times all the way through to well past the rebrand. She was fabulous, kept the business together. She would always ask me what was on my list, and I'd give her a list, and then I wouldn't follow it at all. So I can't give you a list of what's going to come like the next 5 patterns or anything, because I change it all the time. But I do plan more teen patterns because there's a gap there, I feel.
Yeah, one of my friends is hanging for that. She's one of your testers, and she's like, oh, I can't wait for more tween patterns, because her girls are kind of out of the kids ones and just in the adult ones, but like they don't like the adult styling. They want kind of more of the tween looks.
Yeah. So I do intend to do that, and that's helpful that Jack is now in teen sizing. I want to do more adult patterns as well, because I still have more child patterns than I do adult patterns, but at the same time I really enjoy doing I enjoy doing the child patterns as something so terribly cute and satisfying. And I have more courses planned. Courses take me a long time.
Amen.
So far I've managed one a year. There's kind of a good gap in my schedule, usually in December. So I will aim to get another course out at the beginning of next year. And I'm also working more on doing more sort of education stuff around the patterns as well. So doing more blogs and newsletters and YouTubes to try and teach the skills that you need to be able to use patterns. And to be honest, I'm trying to keep everyone happy, but I get so many requests of, oh, can we have an adult size version of this, or can we have a teen size version of this? And I'm like, yes, definitely, when I get to it. Yeah, my to-do list is very long, and my ability is just one person.
Well, at least you know you'll never run out of ideas. Like Waves and Wild's going to be around for a while.
Yes, I'm kept very busy.
Carolyn T asked, for a dress, which are best measurement area to select a starting place for cutting your ready-made patterns bodice? I think she means which where's the best place to start measuring.
So different patterns will have different things that are best depending on the pattern. Some will need you to take all the measurements and figure it out from that, and if you don't fit into a one measurement size like we've talked about, you may have to blend. I do try and put, if there's one that's more important than the other, I do try and put that in my instructions. So for example, the Kinjaling dress, which I'm wearing right now, the style of that means that the waist and the hip measurements are less important, because it has the skirt joins. If I can stand up, you can see the skirt joins higher than the natural waist. So it's very full from, it's not quite empire line, but it's very full below that point. So for that one, it would be your bust measurement. If it was something very fitted, it's not a dress pattern, but if you take like the Superstar bra, you need to have your high bust and your full bust for that one. And if it was a more fitted pattern, if like a jersey pattern or like a wheel dress or something like that, you're going to have to take into account hips as well. So it depends on, every pattern is going to be different. Yeah. If it doesn't say in the instructions, then I would, go off the style and probably start with the bust measurement.
Most patterns that are any good, I think, should tell you kind of what to measure to, shouldn't they? Like you start with this, and a lot of patterns will often have the finished garment measurements as well, so you can see what the ease is. which if you don't know what ease is, it is the difference between cutting it out and what it ends up with in the like the extra fabric, isn't it? Like the yeah. You probably can explain it better than I can. But
the amount of sort of difference between the body size and the garment size. So if you've got a lot of ease in a pattern, you'll have a lot of space between you and the outside. So like this has got a fair amount of ease in it because it's woven and it's quite relaxed, whereas leggings would have negative ease, which means that they are actually smaller than your body, and that's what gives you the sort of athletic, very fitted, tight look, because they have negative, they have less than no space between you and the garment.
Kelly asked, is ease included in the finished pattern measurements?
So, okay, so waves and wild patterns don't have finished pattern measurements on them. So no, there is nothing included in my finished pattern measurements. But in some patterns, they do give the finished pattern measurements, and they may also say how much ease there is. And if they don't, you would be able to work it out by looking at the body measurements for that size and the finished measurements for that size.
And I think a lot of the time, it'll often say the style of garment it is, like, you know, this dress is fit and flare, or, you know, so you might not have the finished pattern measurements, but it'll tell you like how it's intended to fit, which I often think gives you an idea anyway.
Yeah. And also go look at like whether it's a Waves and Wild pattern or whether it's any other designer, like an indie PDF designer, less so the big four. Go look at all the photos because they should have lots of photos on the listing. I always put heaps of photos on the listing, so many that my website people get cross at me and they take some of them down again. And then there's also a page at the end of my instructions, but like any pattern designer that you buy from should give you lots of photos, because then that will show you. So if you're looking at it and you're going, oh, I really like how that fits on all of those people, well, they will have made it based on the measurements. So if you base it on your measurements, you will get a similar fit. If you look at it and you go, oh, that looks really like baggy and oversized and that's not my style, then that's not the fit. That's not the right pattern for you, because when you make it according to your measurements, so like my personal style is a bit oversized. And like sometimes people make this dress and they'll go, oh, it's come out really like big and I don't like it. And then I can help them adjust it to their needs. But actually when I look at them, I'm like, it looks great. Like that's my stuff, but that's my style. Yeah. So if you look at the photos and base, if you like how it looks in the photos, then go for it. And if it's not your style, if it's a too tight a fit, like some people complained that the leggings were too tight. And I'm like, well, it's leggings. That's not the style you're looking for. And you look at the photos and you go, oh, they look really tight. Well, then you know that it's not going to fit how you want it to fit. So either you're going to need to adjust or hunt for a different pattern.
So I think we'll take this one last question from Joy, which is, how long does it take to go from an idea to a pattern being sold online on average? And how do you manage your timelines?
Great question. So if nothing goes wrong, it would be about 2 months. It takes, I'd say that would be about average for if everything goes smoothly. So that's if I did that sort of draft up the first one and it only takes sort of maybe one tweak before I'm happy with that. And then I send it to my testers and it doesn't need any major adjustments. The tests tend to run for sort of about a week to 10 days. And so when you add up all the different sections, I'd say the fastest I've ever got one out would probably be about 6 weeks. And that would have been for something that was more simple. Wow. But that's not normal. 2 months would be a good turnaround. So quite often I've got things overlapping. So quite often I'll have a pattern being tested and I'll already be starting work on the first draft of the next one, which I'm not going to lie, it gets a lot. So sometimes when there aren't as many patterns coming out, like at the moment, if I'm honest, it's because I haven't done that overlap. If I have it, ideally, I always try and get a pattern out about every 4 to 6 weeks. But to do that, I have to overlap. I have to have started one before I finished another. And then every now and then that just gets a bit much and I have to just do the one and do it all and finish it, take a minute, have a cup of tea and start on the next one. Because it can, after 11 years of this and overlap, it can get a lot.
Yeah.
But there have been some that, no joke, have taken 6 months, not 6 months of constant work, but I'll have started it and then it'll have gone for perhaps a pre-test and then something else will have come along and it'll have just got put to the side, or the pre-test had some challenges to it and it's taken me a while to work them out. And there are some patterns that I've never even made it, like though, well, I will return to it, but there was a pattern that we tested before Christmas and it was a very challenging test where half the testers said it was absolutely fabulous and it fit them perfectly and half of them all had the same problem. And just couldn't get my brain around how to deal with, like, if all the testers have a problem, that's easy because then I go, oh, there's the problem, I can fix that. And if only one tester has a problem, I'm like, okay, well, every pattern is going to have a challenge for somebody because people are all different proportions, even when you take measurements. But when half of them and half, my brain, pre-Christmas, that was just not going to happen. So that one's been put on the back burner. It will come back and I will come back to it another time, but it could be anything from a couple of months to towards the end of the year. Because sometimes you just need to take a break and move on to something else that feels inspiring.
What takes longer, the drafting and like designing or the instructions?
The drafting.
Yeah.
And then any adjustments that need doing following the testing, especially if a pattern has got color blocking. Color blocking is not super difficult. Once I've got the basic pattern worked out, so for example, the Jupiter leggings, once I had the leggings pattern worked out, which took a little while because leggings are so fitted, but it wasn't too hard. But then all the color blocking options and all the little pieces and then chopping everything up and then putting the seam allowance back on and making sure that it's all really, really accurate, that takes forever. It took me, like, I think I did a solid week on just the color blocking for the Jupiter leggings, like nothing else. Whereas the instructions, they're not so hard. And I have a wonderful part-time assistant, Kelly, who will help out with some of the diagrams, and she does the bits that I'm not so enthusiastic about. She is absolutely a superstar. She does like the yardage and the pages to print and that need a lot of concentration, and she's just brilliant at that. So no, the instructions are the easy part. The pattern is definitely the time consumer and the challenging part.
Interesting. I also love color blocked things, but because I'm multi-sizes, I hate grading color blocked pieces. It is so hard to get your head around. But I mean, it looks great at the end, but it's just like, I think I'm doing a bit, it hurts my brain. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for your invaluable knowledge. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us. If you want to follow Sarah, her socials are listed in the speaker portal, like in the summit, but I'll also pop it here so that you can sign up. Rosemary's just asked as well, how do I sign up to be a plus size tester? Do you want me to put the hello at Waves and Wild?
Hello at wavesandwild.com. Email it through. That will go through to Kelly.
Just .com or .com.au?
.com.
Okay. All right. There you go, Rosemary. You can do that one there. Sarah is also another presenter who has very generously donated to our VIP package. So for all those with VIP status, you have a 50% off code to all of Sarah's PDF patterns, which is so, so generous. Thank you. Not to mention all the other VIP perks like 12 months to watch the replays, courses and more. So if you want to upgrade, I will pop the link below as well. You can upgrade at any time. Well, actually, you can upgrade until next Tuesday. then it goes away forever. But if you're watching this on the replay, just remember you only have the rest of this week to watch the replay. But as I mentioned, the VIPs get 12 months. So thank you. And I will see everybody again in the morning for day 3, which kicks off with Lindsay from Ellie and Mac Patterns, but she's talking about how to craft your dream job. So I'm looking forward to that conversation as well. So yeah, I'm so blessed to have so many amazing people be involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And yeah, we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.